Holidays, everyone. Welcome back. I think I forgot to put the correct thumbnail in, but we'll have to check that later. Perhaps we can change it after the fact. I don't see why not. That's always festive. Let's shut that off before we get too much music and get into the third of 7 planned ad-libs of this speech. I thought I'd get it all out of my system over the holidays and be finished with it for the year. Let's get me on the screen. Hi, gang. Good morning. Where are we? Let's get started. Yeah, all right. I'll just get into it. This is a speech. It's about 45 minutes long. I'm going to ad-lib and interrupt myself in the middle of it. It should be semi-entertaining. I just have a few things I'd like to add to it, and I will ad-lib randomly as I go along. Nothing's planned here. I think I might have a foresight on something, I might say, but you could say, well, I've heard this guy's story. It's the same old thing he says all the time. True, but I might add a little bit to it that you might find interesting. Besides, it's the holiday, gap. There's people with time. They need a little break. They're UFO Twitter types. They're Alt Propulsion types. So they want to, get a little something. This is a good time slot. It's convenient for me. I happen to look at this thing every morning at this time and read it out loud to myself. And why not? Get some practice live streaming. I want to be comfortable out here. I'm getting comfortable. It gets easier doing this. And I just want to be able to come on here at will, easily. It's getting easier, except I think I might have forgotten a thumbnail, but that could be a YouTube mistake. But anyway, maybe I can fix that afterwards. Hello, everyone. I am Brian Kelly, a retired engineer and attorney with a background in design, construction, startup, and testing, as well as legal issues within the energy, engineering, and construction industries. I also worked in surety and fidelity bonding, including white-collar matters, similar to the Bernie Madoff case, Ponzi schemes, and the one I had with Jeffrey Epstein's mentor. That was a good one. In addition to construction cases at large financial institutions like Citigroup and AIG. New York City. And the details of my background can be found on the links page I just put in the chat, along with a link to the page I am reading from right now. The subject today is called Light Pumping for an Anti-Gravity and Inertial Mass Reduction Effect. This is a concept of mine that is about 10 years old now. I am giving you a bare bones introduction today, because as you can see from the links page, I've got a lot to say and many different ways to say it. So this is just a brief and concise overview. You can read the detailed links and watch the videos posted there at your convenience. Now to the overall concept and general principles. Most importantly, I start with the assumption that light, the full spectrum, is the best medium for us to use to cause an anti-gravity inertial mass reduction effect at this point, and also approaching the speed of light, I might add, and not space-time. Light is in space-time. It's not 1915 anymore, okay, folks? But it is not space-time itself. I am not dealing with space-time. Fabrics, the vacuum, quantum foam, bed sheets, or anything like that. The relevant medium for this concept is also not air. Who puts a bowling ball on a bed? And it is not water, and it is not even space itself, which is mostly just filled with light, but of course has other things in it. The way I see it, air, water, and space are not things that have light within them, so much as they are things that are within light. So, light only, and by that I mean the full spectrum, is the medium here. Secondly, and very simply put, to achieve an anti-gravity and inertial mass reduction effect within this medium, we will mimic the phases of matter, which are in turn caused by energy levels, which are in turn caused by light. So we can use light to move through light by pulling it through the skins and bodies of a massive object, which will simultaneously cause the desired anti-gravity and inertial mass reduction effects. See how it all works together? There is much more to it, of course, but again, this is a bare bones overview. So I can start with this falsifiable statement. One of the first things I dared to post on Twitter back in 2016, quote, "Light pumped through matter reduces the effect of gravity," unquote. That still holds true today, of course, as contradiction of that statement would effectively amount to nullifying the phases of matter, which may be possible, as there is sometimes the oddball exception, but I've never heard of that exception. We can put forth such a general rule because we know that the phases of matter are caused by their energy levels. That is, light moving in, through, out, and around, commonly referred to as absorbed and emitted. I added around to those concepts as an object or craft encased in a bubble of slippery light is going to provide us with mitigated friction drag and inertia in addition to the anti-gravity effect. We will be within things like air, water, and space, but always slightly separated and not interacting directly. This bubble notion is not unlike the warp drive bubble concepts, as some of you may have already surmised. It's a thing that goes through a thing. This one is closer to our scale. It's not at the Planck scale. It's not at the vacuum scale. It's up here with us. These light bubbles can then be intensified, diminished, and shaped to facilitate relative motion with respect to other objects. So we will simply mimic the as yet unfalsified natural phenomenon described as the phases of matter. That phenomenon also generally describes what buoyancy is and the lift of gases. Solids and liquids typically don't lift, despite being comprised of the very same atoms and molecules. But gases do, because of the light pumping in, through, out, and around the molecules and atoms. We will simply harness and scale this well understood effect. Waveguides and the like can also be made to cause the same outcome with the desired anti-gravity like floating. I didn't see it with my own eyes. Come on. We know what you meant. Thank you. And inertial mass reduction effects. We all see this phenomenon constantly, but for the most part, don't appreciate it. It is easily observable in natural archetypes, such as when observing the differences between water ice, liquid water, and water clouds, as well as with man-made airships and balloons, and probably to a lesser extent with butterflies, insects, and birds, a slightly more speculative sidetrack that I am avoiding today because I am only addressing the bare bones. To keep it short, sweet, and hopefully effective, I am sticking to the mostly indisputable today. To debunk what I am suggesting here will take you straight back to the phases of matter themselves and how energy levels work, as well as things like basic buoyancy. Then one would have to explain away how the archetypes mentioned above exist somehow, in spite of the effective energy levels, which are in turn caused by light. Then they would have to explain why these archetypes cannot be mimicked and improved upon drastically, especially given modern material sciences and optomechanical knowledge, because that is precisely what I am now proposing. It took me a while to do it, but the arguments for this concept are now pretty much bulletproof, and new methods to improve upon these natural processes are flowing out of the science and engineering community every single day. Buoyancy, lift, and the phases of matter are material properties that human beings can certainly improve upon and optimize. There is absolutely no reason why they cannot be utilized more effectively and improved upon drastically. Yet this seems obvious, has not been undertaken. It's too obvious. This unfortunate state of things is also why the concept and the general principles I present to you today are not patentable or otherwise able to be monopolized. They belong to everybody. It's nature, folks. But what is done is one thing, and how it is done is quite another. So there will be some intellectual property, but come on, that expires quickly, and there's 1,000 ways to make a wheel spin. So, what I am saying is that the open source anti-gravity and inertial mass reduction process is right in your face. I'm telling you in plain language exactly what that is. It is not 0-point energy, but it is free energy. In your face, I am telling you in plain language exactly what that is. So I propose that we take this free energy and perfect the light-matter interaction in order to bend it to our will, as was done with fire and the motive power of heat in general, and which we can now extend to the entire spectrum. It is time to move beyond that narrow band of infrared upon which we so heavily rely. That is what science and engineering are for. This is how human beings progress. Kicking and screaming. So, this is where the metamaterials come in. Pardon me. For example, the lift of the random hydrogen gas molecules in, say, the Hindenburg, every single one functioning haphazardly and working against each other, could be ordered and purposed and vectored right down to the angstrom level. That is, optimized with metamaterials, molecular and atomic approaches, aerogels, waveguides, photonic crystals, topological insulators, plasmonics, quasi-crystals, sub-wavelength waveguides, and maybe even some mythological, magical isotope tweaking will all likely work. How the isotopes work, I'm not sure exactly. Anyway, but it couldn't hurt. If you can engineer that, you can make the thing move light quicker. That I do know. But these metamaterial design and fabrication efforts must be working toward a feasible, intelligible, indisputable, unfalsified general principle, and light pumping is indeed such a principle. If we also happen to bend space-time or warp the vacuum by accident along the way to this idiot-proof sure thing, then so be it. Have at it. Stranger things have happened. But in the meantime, we are going to use those metamaterials and waveguides to capture and transfer the explosive momentum of ambient mass equivalent light. You can call it a continuous radiation pressure or even thrust from reloadable fuel until you get comfortable with the idea. But just keep on thinking about those angstrom-sized atoms or sub-wavelength waveguides capturing and exploding photons thousands of times larger than they are in the nanometers, and how fast they can be made to do so. What do you think's happening in an airship? Capturing and exploding photons, all right? Just not efficiently. And also internalize and understand the fact that the very medium you will be pumping through is also a highly efficient propellant when used correctly. Oh yeah. Did you hear me back there, skunkworks? Or shall I repeat that? Anyway, this is how you do propellantless, at least for the time being. We are talking about angstrom-sized nanopumps and picometer waveguide systems that are hardwired by nature to run and keep running at attosecond light speeds and higher. That's 18 zeros per second every second since the Big Bang. It is not quite perpetual motion, but those numbers will work out fine for most of us. Per square inch, those angstroms are in the quadrillions by area and the quintillions by volume, or thereabouts. That is 15 more zeros by area, working with those 18 zero attoseconds in an already lighter than air metamaterial, such as graphene, which is simply hydrogenated graphene, which is simply graphene soaked in hydrogen. These materials can fuse those nanopumps into a solid chunk of a skin, comprised of automatically refueling nanorockets in the octillions, all acting as one. Yes, the skin is This kind of design will start to approach optimal energy densities. That's the kind of thing an advanced intelligence would do, isn't it? Which would then be compounded with femtosecond and attosecond time scales to produce paradigm shifting efficiency. So you take time and space and you use it. Things like that will give you a radiant flux per mass density in abundance. That's how much light you can move, how quickly, how fast, per unit weight. That's like horsepower in our language here. Or thrust, The shorthand. But it'll give you that in abundance. Petajoules and zetawatts and whatever other gigawatts operates the door locks. And you don't even need that. But that's another argument. That we're not having that one now. And are becoming achievable here and now. Yeah, every frickin' day. Follow me on Twitter if you want to know why. It's in the description somewhere, I think. There are many, many ways to look at this concept, mostly all describing the same thing, which is a good thing, folks. From Newton and forces to Einstein's description of the mass equivalence of light, to floating iridescent hummingbirds. Ever see one drop like a tic-tac? Why do they do that? And butterflies, they just shut off and sink sometimes. Ever notice that? That doesn't seem very Newtonian. To tales of the UAPs themselves, allegedly. That is why there's a link to the links above, and why this presentation has to be short and sweet and packed with things unfalsifiable with unfalsified statements. Did you hear that? Indisputable statements and mind-numbingly large, small, and fast numbers. Add them up until people get the general idea of what I am talking about. Then we can get into all the subtleties, which certainly do exist, but are not dispositive of the overall undeniable efficacy here. Are they? So basically, I am all but telling you the way it is, not suggesting it. I'm done with that. Nature is what it is. That's the way it is. And it has been here the whole time. The science is already there, going back to at least the Greeks anyway, and almost certainly further. The math seems to be lagging right now, though, just as it was for the Montgolfier brothers, the Wright brothers, and the early Chinese rocket scientists. As with them, the equations will have to play catch up here as usual. Catch up. Sometimes we lose sight of the fact that physical concepts and ideas exist independently of the many eccentric ways to explain them. That said, and this is a serious part despite me yelling and all that. Go back and read it later if I get too histrionic. That said, I will go on to suggest that equations around supercavitating bubbles and fluids within variable gravitational fields might be one way to describe this. Or it might be like the SCU. I did remember them yesterday. I'm remembering them again today. They wrote a paper similar to this. It's a head start in this field. You're thinking in terms of bubbles in fluids. Now think in terms of bubbles of light in a fluid called air or space or water or any atmosphere of any planet or anything that's not a solid. That's the warp drive stuff, which is not what we're discussing today. But right now, there's not even a consensus, I think I read that line, consensus on photon mass for thrust, despite photons being the drivers of most of it, or barely even the notion of fields of light in air or water, or the force of gravity within is diminished. That's your light bubble that I have ever seen. I don't know, where in science would that be? I'll leave that to you. I can't think of a natural phenomenon where that happens. I looked a long time ago before I wrote this, but, other people might have a better knowledge. If you do, please let me know. Perhaps something like that exists or should exist for supercavitating hypersonics and submarines, but I doubt it. There's your national defense security excuse. Write a budget for it. 3 mathematicians, whatever it takes. It's an easy concept. But writing it up might be, you can do that. Thanks. Pardon me. Perhaps something like that exists. No, I read that part. Are the tensors and cones any different under such conditions? Yes, they probably are, but that's really not where we're at. But go ahead. Are the tensors? Is a region of curved space less curved in that instance? General relativity. Yeah, probably you can do it that way. It's not, if it makes you feel good, do it. Are the gravitons no longer as coherently aligned? I happen to think so. That's where I come from. Gravitons, gravity, waves going through gravitons. We call them gravity waves. Okay, they add up a little tiny Planck length thing. Well, it's a little particle. We're not getting into that today. It's not even a particle. It's waves overlapping. It looks like a particle where you measure it, but you haven't been able to measure it yet because it's very small. You can measure the waves. You can measure you can measure them together in waves, but you still can't measure the thing. Anyway, that's where I see the math there of little things adding up to big waves. I happen to think so, but that is inconsequential because I don't think anyone has ever thought about some of these things mathematically. Why would they? But again, well, national defense, I just told you. But again, you see that, what? Oh, crap. Pardon my language there. I clicked when I pointed and clicked by mistake. But that tic-tac, that's a light bubble imagined by me. Now, your hypersonic missile should have that same sort of thing, ideally, because it'll be even more hypersonic. And so should your submarine, because it'll be quicker in the water, because it's not touching the water. But I don't think anyone's ever thought about some of these things mathematically. Why would they? But again, right now, as far as I am concerned, that is their problem. Plus, you have the money and the manpower. Not ours. I don't know why this scenario isn't already on paper and barely care right now. I am here to get the ball. I am here to float away at will. It's rotating and shoot off at the speed of light in my own cozy little light bubble using the absolutely obvious characteristics of nature. Did you hear that part? The absolutely obvious characteristics of nature. There's not a lot of mystery here, folks. How that is documented later is of secondary importance, but despite my apparent hubris, I would be glad to help with the bookkeeping. Please just spell my name correctly. I would also like to ask somebody more mathematically proficient than myself to explain how the mass of a light entangling, and by entangling I mean in the plain meaning of the word, not the spooky action, with Alice and Bob sense, how the mass of a light entangling object over time, losing its mass equivalent at a rate greater than the local gravitational field's acceleration requires, may be likened to a snapshot of negative mass. See this sentence? This is why this is written down. I've said this before, but I can't remember that off the top of my head. How the mass of a light entangling object over time losing its mass. That's as simple as I can boil it down into words. So that's why it's written down for you to read also. Or perhaps we can update the rocket equation. That's another story. Check yesterday's for my little rocket equation story. Update the rocket equation, make it continuous. You just keep reloading the fuel, okay? And the fuel is light. It's a photon. So you need a photon mass for thrust. See? See why he doesn't have equations. Yeah, I don't. Put the rocket in him, but that rocket equation is helpful. Put the rocket in a mitigated gravitational field of its own making. As the rocket goes, somehow it's less subject. You take the gravitational field and you change it. Of its own making, you change it quicker, because you're changing it while you're still on the launch pad. You're down here in 32 seconds per second, but you're not in it, because you have a slippery light bubble around you to reduce drag, friction, and inertial mass. How do we rewrite F equals ma for a body in motion when a major component of that body is not mass, but mass equivalence. The photon, which has no solid number on it. The thing with this is, I tried, believe me, I did try. I made an effort as far as I could get. Bachelor's in engineering, a legal degree doesn't help you with that, believe me. And my work experience was not at that level of calculating that stuff that doesn't already exist. It's more like a computer and a calculator. The thing with this is, this concept can be described 6 ways to Sunday and back. But apparently, since that hasn't been done conclusively to date, this novel concept, which is as novel as looking out the window, which is simply mimicking what already exists in nature, but you have to pay attention and then think about it, we'll have to bring that about. So yes, the current lack of comprehensive mathematical descriptions is a weakness here. But that is not an obstacle, merely a historical footnote. Because the phases stand unfalsified and archetypes exist. I point too much at the screen. I'm reading the line. The notion of optimization, which would involve the engineering of metamaterials in this case, has proven worthwhile over and over and over again throughout history. And this concept is fresh, fertile ground. You can see all of this with your own eyes, whether you appreciate it yet or not. That the math is once again lagging innovation is merely a secondary concern and often does. Not always, but often. Fortunately, that gives other people something to do. One upside to this weakness is it will also cause people to realize that although this concept has yet to be described mathematically to everyone's satisfaction, including my own, because I still have to talk about it, it is also impossible to debunk mathematically. Let me repeat that. It is also impossible to debunk mathematically. Unless you do your 2 + 2 is 5 stuff. It isn't in this universe, okay? Because nature is what it is, no matter what has or has not been written or published about it. And while sufficient archetypes already exist, this concept is indeed testable as well. I started experimenting with balloons and mirrors early on and did it for years. But for this crowd, a basic metamaterial might be necessary, or something like that. Starting with perhaps a homemade street corner bootleg graphene or equivalent. Think of it this way, all you will do is taking something lighter than air, like graphene, and making it even lighter than air. Okay? Start thinking that way. You don't think usually, well, yeah, if I add this to it, it'll be lighter. Do you think that way, aerospace engineers? No, you don't. Because, you can't right now. But I'm telling you how you can. You get that? That's what you're doing. You're making it even lighter. Lighter than light. 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 You want to be light-like. That's why you start with hydrogen. You're matter. Okay, we're all matter here. That's mass, our fellow mass. That's what I call hydrogen. Because it's defined that way on the periodic table, even though I see it as more of a fringe. It's where one meets the other. So we're going to use it because we can capture it. It's big enough that we can use it to capture light. So you start there, and then you make waveguides and you make all kind of fancy crystals or whatever you want to do. But you have to start somewhere. Hydrogen is there for a reason. All right, a purpose, and we are going to use it. Where am I? Making it lighter than air. See, I didn't plan that at all. That's why I'm doing these live. Because this stuff just flows out. and I get it off my chest, and I'm done thinking about it. And you've heard it, and it's on the record. And then you gradually learn to control its inertia mitigating anti-gravity properties. You dope it to turn left. You decorate it to turn right. Whatever it takes. Then you start building around it. Lighter than light. Be light-like. Then you start building around it. Instead of a mirror deterministically reflecting the sun onto a balloon, maybe Mark Sokol chasing a piece of street graphene through the back alleys of North Jersey with Jeremiah's magic wand might be the stunt that finally opens the world's eyes. Or Josh Bertrand with aerogels and vacuum gizmos. Or Wayne Ojala, who is in the images here, the intros and outros, doing his experiment where he puts light, he shows that light comes into this region and is diminishing the effect of gravity, okay? He creates a light bubble area from this side. Granted, from this side, you got to start somewhere. And it infuses this area with more light than was there. And the thing on the pendulum floats toward it. All right? Did you notice that in the Pentagon? When you were using drill bits and stuff? Trying to open well, that was a long time ago, but we'll all look back and laugh. Where was I? The magic wand, or as I suggested to certain well-known TTSA members repeatedly on Twitter years ago, put the material in a chamber and just fiddle around with the different electromagnetic fields. The electric field, the magnetic field, the electromagnetic field, which is light. Those are three different things, ladies and gentlemen. I keep repeating that because, boy, did I get stuck on that in the beginning, and a lot of you are like, what do they mean, electromagnetic? How is that? Well, it is three separate things. Electric, magnetic, the right-hand rule. Your finger, the electric goes this way, you make a fist, and the magnetic goes up your thumb. The right-hand rule. And electromagnetic, I guess you'd take your thumb and twist it, or you'd cut your fist in half. Because what is an electron that creates magnetism and electric fields? What is it? Some of you know. I know who you are. You know who you are. It's two photons wrapped around each other. Okay? Typically, they are gammas. That's our standard, average, off-the-shelf electron. Your basic model. But there are bigger electrons. They form in lightning. It's a long story. I have another whole spiel on that. And it's not just me this time. Argonne Lab has the paper that nails it. Okay? So that's what an electromagnet, that's why it's called that. But, you have to dig through there to logically break it down and say it just like I did in plain language. Okay, there's a lot of mysticism there where, they assume you know this much because you memorized it to pass the test. Okay, all right, we did. So when I was older, not this old, I went back and looked at it. Why? Why would you do it? Because I was trying to get back into the nuclear industry from being a lawyer for a long time. I wanted to be a lawyer in there, but that's another story. But because I was in the first wave of U.S. nuclear builds. I was young enough to have been in that and had a pretty decent jobs in it. But then the industry shut down. Then it was coming back years later. I realized, I forgot every bit of science. I've been a lawyer too long. Construction cases, yeah, it's a little bit technical, but not like that. Not like nuclear power. We were doing fiber optics back in the 70s in there. I'm like, what the heck is this? Well, it's only on here in the space shuttle, okay? And that's light, by the way. Anyway, I got interested in it. It's a long story. What is an electron? Well, I figured we're getting off this. We're ad-libbing a bit too much here. Then you dope it to turn left. We passed that part. the electromagnetic fields, X-rays, radio waves, sound, or whatever frequencies you have handy to see what affects and controls it, okay? Yeah. Ultimately, we will build... We will build around these malleable material properties of lift and buoyancy, which are caused by light, and optimize them until we're pumping light at a rate approaching the speed of light. How's that for a mission statement? Do I have to add for Uber on there or something like that? Uber for 99.9% of the speed of light. Uber for anti-gravity. Then would you listen, you pinheads? So, sorry for the insult. It's just the internal dialogue comes out because I see the trivial BS going on in Silicon Valley and the like. Ultimately, I'll say that again. It may seem very silly and funny for a while with a magic wand, like it was for me in the balloons, but ultimately this cannot not work. Another bonus. I'll say that again. This time for Raytheon and DOE in the back. Ultimately, this cannot not work. How do you screw up this buoyancy? At some point, it is just simple common sense. But I realize and acknowledge that a few performative hoops may be desirable here. But no, it is not as awe-inspiring as warp drive. Performative hoops are coming up. But no, it is not as awe-inspiring as warp drive. But bulletproof and idiot-proof will just have to do for now. So take a quick look later at what I call a Philly flyer, linked right here on the page, for an idea of what that might look like at first. Maybe before we get the magic wand out, something along these lines might inspire the experimentalists. But we can talk about all that stuff later. This is a bare bones overview. It is not intended to be a deep dive into waveguide and metamaterial technology. You can really start rambling on that, right? Okay, getting away from the prototypes and back to the archetypes. I would expound for just a moment on the UAPs and UFOs themselves. I have personally never seen one. Some of you have, but we have all heard the stories, and people familiar to us all claim to have seen the compelling data. It's always compelling data. I tend to generally believe these accounts because they describe multispectral signatures and light-pumping behavior as precisely as I would expect them to be with the so-called glowing auras of cold light. Ooh. To me, the 5 observables should be called the 5 utterly predictables. I have a webpage on precisely that topic, in fact. But since we are bare bones here today, and that is a huge distraction, I will say nothing further about it now. You can find that link later and read it to see why I occasionally cannot help but scoff at Arrow and ATIP and TTSA. Scoff. And all the infotainment limited hangout slow roller types that don't see things with their own eyes. Okay, we get it. The UAPs are, in all likelihood, pumping the full spectrum of light within a medium of light. Just like a Virginia-class submarine pumps water, but doing so far more efficiently. I don't expect anybody listening right now to buy that line wholesale, except the ones that already do but won't say so. How long is that going to last? When are you going to slip up? But at some point, I predict that all of you will see that this stuff could not be more obvious. As for inertia means very little when your craft surfaces are not directly touching atmospheres, be they gaseous or liquid, but are instead encased in a nice slippery light bubble. There's a bit more to it in my opinion, but that gets into spin 2 gravitons and why spin 1 photons cut right through them, which is the kind of thing I'm skipping in this bare bones overview. Similarly, Gravity means little to nothing to mass when the mass is losing mass equivalence at a rate greater than the local gravitational field's acceleration requires. In space, you would just aim the thing at the nearest star and start pulling light through the mass and pumping it back out at a rate approaching the speed of light. The craft will be pulling and pumping light in, through, out, and around, while maintaining its own little protective and slippery bubble or cavity. So the space rocks bounce off radiation pressure or slip. It's too slippy. I got $10 that says that is what most of these alleged UFOs and so-called unidentified anomalous phenomenon are doing. But we will just have to wait. Are you waiting? Leon Panetta, are you out of your mind? And see. Okay, so the bottom line here is that this stuff is actually simple and idiot-proof. Kramer, it boils down to a recognition of the need to optimize an analog of the phases of matter for a certain purpose, commonly called buoyancy, or perhaps now, ironic air quotes, everybody, anti-gravity. Human beings have been changing material properties since before the cave was invented. Am I right? So why stop now? This milestone, anti-gravity and inertial mass reduction, is one that we have not yet fully addressed with even the most basic tools and easiest concepts at our disposal. Chinese balloons. Balloon-like cylinders. Come on. That's where you're at? But only with notions that, while ambitious, are not yet feasible. So let's just admit that much. Get over the embarrassment of letting the accomplishments of the Montgolfier brothers and their progenitors languish, and get on with it. Building around the inertial and gravitational mitigation properties of the light matter interaction is a natural step. Okay? It just got waylaid for a while in favor of force and thrust. Instead of using brute force explosions to overcome gravity, we will use the benefit of higher energy levels to free ourselves from gravity and inertia. That's what you're doing. You're freeing yourself from gravity and inertia. You're not pushing and blasting and ripping space-time at the very fabric, or pulling it out and reaching Planck lengths across the universe. No. It's easier, okay? It just got waylaid for, where am I? Where'd I get? I lost myself there, see? In a more subtle, elegant, and effective manner, okay? Put one foot in front of the other, okay? Can you do that for me? This approach involves harnessing and using ambient energy in real time and is not unlike solar power in that respect. Make no mistake. This is the hard tech play of the century, folks. Waiting to happen, folks. If I do say so myself, and I won't even mention the green energy aspect of it because I shouldn't have to. I may sound a little underwhelmed about this sometimes, but I'm fully aware of those facts and just a little bit fatigued by them. The free energy is all around us. It's there when you look out your window, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. I can't resist it. I got it. Right down to the visible light and temperature in the environment wherever you may be enjoying this presentation. So take the red pill, my friends. This free energy includes the entire terahertz spectrum, by the way, which is another distraction I've saved for later. But all that is the temperature range found everywhere in the universe between negative 459 and positive 334 degrees. It's temperature, Fahrenheit, temperature. The temperature of space to a hot temperature near Mercury, floating off the sun of Mercury, and then it turns into gigahertz or something. So you're using temperature, which is everywhere. You're using that to get through that. How do you do that? You do what I said above. Like, share, subscribe. Yeah, so that's... So if you want anti-gravity, inertial mass reduction, and free energy, Neo, first realize that you are in fact sitting in it. You had that question. I forget what she says. You've always wanted to know. Whenever she goads him in after he falls white rabbit. I am here to tell you how to capture it and use it. To quote myself, if I may. Large numbers of little things doing little things quickly and repeatedly add up to very big things. Energy density, synapses in your brain. You know what it is, but do you know what it is? In this case, the underappreciated scales and numbers in nature are far more relevant to solving this problem than our equations, at least for right now. And we will be using time as a tool here, letting things just do what they do naturally at the very high speeds they do them at. Sometimes they say laziness breeds innovation. When you set things up to do what they would be doing anyway, but so that they are doing them optimally for a purpose, that is how words like propellantless and perpetual motion leave the fiction and fantasy realm to become real life. There are zeros upon zeros of bulletproof, idiot-proof, octo-quadrillion, zepto-quintillions just sitting out there waiting to be used. Those tiny little things in such large numbers and in such high speeds and in such small spaces. That's energy density, folks. Ambient free energy. Captured. Densified. That's a word, right? Densified. Compound and add up. As anyone who has ever worked around nuclear energy, as I have, or seen Oppenheimer twice in the theater, as I have, how about when that big bomb goes off? As I have, can tell you. Plus, there's megawatts still going, not too far from here, where I used to work. They upgraded them, 2 of them, 1,000 mega, 1G, whatever, gigas, I don't know. It's been a while. And it comes out of little tiny fuel rods compared to waiting for the sun to come out, the wind, digging coal, all that hard stuff. But it takes a lot of money and time to build those things. I was there. I was trying to get back into it when I got into this, too. That's another long story. Because Fukushima happened and the Americans got afraid to build all those plants they had on the blackboard. So there is no excuse why inertial mass reduction, now that we know what it is, anti-gravity, inertial mass reduction, cannot be achieved starting now with us. Probably cheaper than those nuke plants. With that kind of money, just to build one, well, that's a lot of money, but we'll do that later. The technologies are already out there, but they are unguided. They're doing it for us. Unpurposed, ignored, forgotten, and or underpurposed. What do you think all that nanotechnology they're doing is for? Basic research, yeah, but where's it going? I am here to get the ball rolling in the right direction by first focusing people on intelligible. I'm trying to make it intelligible, feasible, and achievable concepts, and then developing them. All right, winding down. When you are stuck with a difficult situation in life, happy holidays, everyone. Sometimes difficult situations pop up then, so that you have to repeatedly reframe a problem, and it seems to be going nowhere. Sometimes you will stumble upon a much easier solution than the ones you have been trying over and over and over and over and over again to no avail. Sometimes it can be shockingly simple, as anyone who has ever tried unplugging it and then plugging it back in can attest. Unplug it for 10 seconds. This is one of those times. Normally, I would call myself a simpleton here and joke about how it takes a simpleton to find the simplest solution. But not this time. Instead, once again, I will assert that this light-pumping concept is the way to go now to make the most progress in the least time with the knowledge and resources we already have. People should keep working on the warp drives, gravity generation, quantum inertia, and whatever else. But again, I would assert that this almost mindless, overlooked simplicity is undoubtedly the best path to pursue vigorously. And that is just the base reality for now. There's nothing wrong with going the easy way sometimes. It's just a little embarrassing admitting it, though, sometimes. Because it's like, well, why didn't I think of that first? Because I forgot the last time I called the cable company. They told me to do that, and I've been doing it for 20-some years or more. And it can only succeed. Period. This outcome will happen eventually anyway, with or without us here and now. But why not us, and why not now? At the risk of sounding defensive, pardon me. The logic behind this concept cannot be seriously questioned. If you can, help me out here. The physics is already there. Anyone can see it. With the energy levels and phases, it is what it is. I mean, you have oddball triple points of water. Certain things like that exist. You can make little cheap arguments here and there, but, you know, it is what it is. So you can either accept that and start working toward the future or not. The math is mostly there, and things become pretty obvious when considering the undeniable effectiveness and the possibilities of cascading scales of time and photonic momentum. That's your energy density. This reality is almost indisputable, despite the fact that the concept is perhaps lacking its best and most concise description with mathematical symbols. Perhaps ironically, the engineering and fabrication technologies are both further along than those aspects, because there are people all around the world right now doing this work all around the world right now. I can't get him centered there. In academic laboratories and fledgling industries. The basic materials for a lot of this are already out there, but their use has not been correctly purposed, let alone optimized. It is up to us in this tinfoil hat affinity group and associated to tinfoil hat affinity groups such as UFO Twitter, Alt Propulsion, APEC, wackos of YouTube and Rumble to start to make that happen. Plus Silicon Valley. Open your wallet. I'm coming for you, whether you like it or not. In closing, I realize, and it doesn't have to be you either. You're last. You're on the list. The ones in Florida are. Let's put it that way, if you know what I'm saying. In closing, I realize that I may not have explained this to everyone's liking as yet. And that is understandable. On the other hand, there's very little chance that this notion can fail. One way or another, it'll happen eventually anyway, even if this is only a step toward bigger and better things. So now it is your turn out there. I will gladly take questions now or anytime on X, formerly known as Twitter, or in my YouTube and Rumble channel comments, where other people might benefit from our interaction. And additionally, I plan on doing more shows like this, perhaps joining a few subject matter groups and further expanding my small YouTube and Rumble channels until all of this becomes painfully obvious. After 10 years, I consistently bore myself by thinking about this too much, as it can get repetitive and tedious. But I never get tired of discussing it, and the future is wide open. In the meantime, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak. Jeremy, Tim, Bernie, your name here. I'm ready for questions. But first, I'm going to take a breath or two and collect my thoughts and have a sip of lukewarm coffee. Thank you for listening, folks. Now, let's see if anyone put any questions in the chat or on Twitter. I don't expect anything, but nobody there. 11 messages there. Let's see if they... Oh, there's a nice comment. Thank you very much for the nice comment, Korea UFO. Also known as Joshua Bertrand. And so we have no questions today, so that means we can do an outro. We can do an outro and go home. Let's see, what do we do now? We look at this thing again, while I look at this thing. And I will shut that off. Go to the desk only. Play some music. Where was I? Which screen am I on here? Okay. How did I get all the way over there? Oh, I'm on the wrong screen. Pardon me, folks. They all have Twitter up. And I was on this Twitter. And again, we see here, well, I'm in no rush. Let's see if there's any questions on this view. Up. No, just me still talking from a minute ago. So, we can go, we can leave. That's fine. Where are we? We're music-wise, we had something planned here. And all we have to do now is find it. Here it is. Emerald Seas by Aaron Kenny, and then we will hear number 1, A minor waltz by Esther Abrami. Thanks for coming, folks. See you next time. See that thing falling toward the light? Fail forward research on YouTube. That's air. See how it doesn't penetrate? See how big the photons are compared to the atoms